A string of box office failures.
We reported that Walt Disney Studios was on shaky financial ground because of its troubled film division.
An ousted CEO.
There's been a management shakeup in the Magic Kingdom of Disney.
And questions about whether Disney might be on the verge of collapse.
I began hearing things like, well, they don't think they really want to stay in the movie business because it's not doing very well.
This isn't the present day. This is a little something I call the 1980s. Didn't see that coming, did you? Or maybe you did, because I telegraphed it pretty hard. As we all know, Disney has found itself in a bit of a rough patch lately. But before we delve into all that, I think in honor of Disney's 100-year anniversary, we should take a moment while looking at all this recent failure, mediocrity, and controversy, and remember that it all started with a mouse, and a goat, and a cow, and whatever this thing is, and a cat, and oh my god, what is he doing to that cat? And that goose. Holy crap, this guy is a psychopath. Does it count as animal abuse if it's being done by another animal? You know, it's kind of amazing that Mickey's current design is so close to his original design, especially compared to how much Donald Duck's design has changed. It's shaping up to be the beginning of a new flop era for Disney. It's almost nothing but one bomb after another lately. The Little Mermaid vastly underperformed the other live-action Disney remakes. The Marvels was the lowest-grossing Marvel movie ever, and it was all topped off with Wish, a movie so bland and forgettable that I've already forgotten what movie I'm even talking about right now. Lately, the wonderful world of Disney has been looking more like the Blunderful world of Disney. These days, the House of Mouse is looking more like the House of Shit. And it's not just the box office that's been disappointing. Disney has been accused of being in a bit of an artistic slump in recent years, pumping out mediocre cash grabs. It's a far cry from the glory days. You know, Walt Disney used to take great pleasure in making genuinely enchanting, award-winning movies. Some might even say he took a little too much pleasure.
Aren't you proud of it, Mr. Disney?
Well, I'm so proud, I think I'll bust.
I'd prefer it if you didn't, mister. Now, have I personally seen all these movies that have flopped? No, but that's not gonna stop me from trashing them. And if you think that seems petty and needlessly negative, I have something to say to you. Welcome to the internet. Here's a cat playing piano. But Disney is no stranger to flops. They've had a number of box office bombs over the years. Disney's current troubles pale in comparison to their 1980s era, which was fraught with so many changes, tensions, and financial setbacks that at one point there were fears that the historic animation studio was going to be shut down completely. In fact, the 80s are often referred to as Disney's dark ages. And the backdrop for all of this was The Black Cauldron, which first started pre-production in the 70s. In its early stages, Disney had big hopes for the film, with some officials even touting it as the Snow White for the next generation. Unfortunately, the movie went on to have such a troubled production that it came out 5 years late and went so many millions of dollars over budget that it snowballed into the most expensive animated film ever made up to that point. The problems with the movie were multifaceted. First of all, Disney's vision for it was, some might argue, a little overly ambitious. It was based on a fantasy series called The Chronicles of Prydain, of which there were 5 books that Disney tried to cram into a single movie.
We started with 5 books and had to condense them down into one.
There were also plans to install special equipment into theaters to show a holographic sequence during the movie. The idea was eventually scrapped, but according to the movie's producer, they had a working prototype where holographs of these skeleton dudes came out of a cauldron and went up to the top of the theater. So they had a working version of this? In the early 80s? Why did we all have to wear those stupid 3D glasses? Movie theaters could have been beaming holograms into our faces. Complicating things further, the tone of the film was much more dark and mature than anything Disney Animation had done in the past. This was partly an attempt to create a film that was more appealing to teenagers who felt that Disney movies were too kiddie for them.
The studio did a survey that revealed a majority of teenage moviegoers wouldn't be caught dead near a Disney movie.
But some people felt that the movie was shaping up to be too dark. Disney chairman Jeffrey Katzenberg was so appalled by the movie's dark tone that he demanded large chunks of it be cut, much to the protest of the animators who insisted that animated films, at least at that time, couldn't simply be edited the way live-action movies could. Almost 12 fully animated minutes were cut from the movie, leading to a final product with some pretty roughshod editing at certain parts. There's one dramatic scene where these undead skeleton warriors are rising up, and you can actually hear the music skip ahead. That's an unedited bit of what was originally a longer scene. Well, it is edited, but edited by Disney. What I did is unedited. What they did is an edited bit of the undead, and I did a clip of the edited bit of the undead, and it is unedited. Anyway, I think Katzenberg had a point about the film being too dark. There's images from one of the deleted portions of the movie that show a guard's flesh bubbling up and then rapidly decaying off of his body, and spoiler alert, he doesn't survive. There was also tension brewing in the animation department between the old, seasoned animators and the young, new, cocky animators.
It was thrilling to learn from the masters but there was a feeling like that somehow we could be making better films.
And even worse was that many of the new animators weren't experienced enough to handle the complexities of the film. Things were so bad that the movie got delayed by 4 years. But Disney's issues went beyond just the Black Cauldron. In the 70s, there were years of friction and disagreement about the direction the company was taking, which eventually caused Walt Disney's nephew Roy Disney to resign as chairman in 1977.
Another surprise, the resignation of Roy E. Disney as chairman of the board.
I actually, somewhere along the line, began hearing things like, well, they don't think they really want to stay in the movie business because it's not doing very well and we don't really even need it anyway. And that gave me all sorts of problems.
And then in 1979, there was a bombshell, a betrayal of animaic proportions. Disney golden boy and leader of the animation department, Don Bluth, suddenly resigned and took half the animators with him to start his own studio, where he'd finally be able to traumatize children to his heart's content with films like The Land Before Time and The Secret of NIMH. Then on top of everything else going on, in 1982, there was a 10-week-long animator strike. Things were so dire that anyone who could hold a brush was given lessons in cell painting and set to work, which explains this part of the Black Cauldron, which I always thought kind of stood out in a bad way.
Up here!
But the problems didn't stop there. In 1984, Disney found itself the target of a hostile takeover by an investor named Saul Steinberg, who had indicated intentions of buying Disney and selling off the assets for a profit. Disney settled the issues by paying him a premium to buy back his shares, which enraged other Disney investors. One major Disney investor said, "We consider the Disney buyout of Saul Steinberg as the worst example of this kind." And that very same year, the Disney CEO Ron Miller was ousted from the company, just like Bob Chapek was ousted as Disney CEO in 2022. History really does repeat itself, doesn't it? As a replacement, 3 new executives were brought on board who had no prior experience with animation. Michael Eisner as CEO, Frank Wells as president, and Jeffrey Katzenberg as chairman.
Hollywood studio executives have been chosen to run Walt Disney Productions, the first time outsiders have been brought in at the top.
This led to a culture clash between executives and artists. Disney animator Michael Peraza recounted a blog post that soon after Michael Eisner was brought on board, he announced in front of a bunch of Disney employees that he grew up loving all the Disney characters, saying, quote, "After all, who could ever forget Heckle and Jekyll and Mighty Mouse?" If you're unfamiliar, those are not Disney characters. I guess he gets some points for at least naming characters who were animated. It would have been worse if he had named characters that had nothing to do with animation. I grew up loving all the Disney characters, like the Quaker Oats guy, and my neighbor, Larry. Jeffrey Katzenberg was apparently not much better.
He said, I'm not interested in the Academy Awards. I'm interested in the Bank of America Awards, what the money of these things pull in. And it was just absolutely the worst thing to tell a room full of artists. It was so discouraging.
This invasion of Hollywood executives fueled fears among Disney employees that the company's culture was collapsing and artistic freedom was being smothered.
My experience was with kindly old men with cardigan sweaters, and they would sit around and pat you on the back. And here's these guys hollering foul language in the middle of story meetings. A wake up to reality, you're in the real world here.
And as if things weren't bad enough, they instituted a new rule that the lowest performing Disney employees would be fed to lions. In the midst of all this commotion, The Black Cauldron was finally released, and it was met with disappointing box office numbers and a cold critical reception. It was widely criticized for being too adult. It was scary, it was violent, it had full frontal nudity. I mean, yeah, it's a pig, but technically nude. I mean, Porky Pig has the decency to at least wear a jacket. And I know people like to say, why does Porky Pig wear a jacket but no pants? Shouldn't he be covering up his bottom half? Well, do you see anything on his bottom half that needs to be covered up? It's obvious why he doesn't wear pants. His wiener is on his back. That's why we've never seen Porky Pig's piggy pork. The movie does have some really grim moments. Near the end, the character Gurgi, who is the goofy comedic sidekick, decides to sacrifice himself to save his friends by tossing himself off a ledge and into the cauldron. Then there's the main villain, who's terrifying looking and gets his flesh torn off his body before he dies. Disney animator Michael Peraza recalled a public screening of the movie where he witnessed an exodus of crying kids and upset parents fleeing from the theater. The general sentiment was that the film was just too dark and bleak. Audiences felt like it just wasn't Disney. Counterpoint, this Mickey and the Beanstalk short film from 1947 that showed Mickey, Donald, and Goofy almost starving to death, and Donald trying to kill a cow with an axe in a hunger-fueled rampage. Where's Where's the whimsical Disney of those days? Dark tone aside, the consensus was that the Black Cauldron's issues came down to the basics. The characters were bland and the story wasn't that compelling. Some reviews were harsher than others. The Beaver County Times absolutely roasted the movie, calling it just an expensive cartoon. Ooh, all I gotta say to the Beaver County Times is, damn. There were a few notable exceptions to the multitude of negative reviews. Roger Ebert called the film a rip-roaring tale of swords and sorcery, back when the phrase rip-roaring was still used unironically. Personally, I thought the movie was a rootin' tootin' good time. And Disney, who I'm sure was scrounging for any positive press towards the movie they could find, made sure to milk that quote for all it was worth when the movie eventually came out on VHS. Ebert's quote was put on the VHS case, on posters, in promos.
Now, the movie Roger Ebert calls a rip-roaring tale of swords, sorcery, and magic.
I think at one point they actually changed the name of the movie to A Rip-Roaring Tale of Swords, Sorcery, and Magic. When all was said and done, the movie earned a measly $21 million at the box office against a budget of $44 million. Now, I'm not good at math, but I think that's a loss of like $1 billion. Hey Disney, that's what you get for going woke. Should have made it the White Cauldron. And adding insult to injury, the Care Bears movie that came out the same year made $12 million more than the Black Cauldron. Sorry Disney, I guess your movie should have had a little less flesh tearing off of people's bodies and a little more rainbows blasting out of people's chests. So, with the Black Cauldron turning out to be a massive flop, the relationship between Disney's animation studio and the executives started to sour even more. The animation department was notified in a memo that they were going to be relocated out of the classic animation building.
This was the building where Walt Disney made Cinderella and Peter Pan, and we were having to vacate? All there was this memo. There's no meeting, no debate, just a memo.
The new studio was a shabby little building that one animator described as a gutted wretch of a building with torn up carpets, cinder blocks, and broken bottles in the parking lot. The animators took this as a warning sign that the animation studio was on its last leg.
Well, we were all pretty sure that we'd be fired in a week or so we decided to celebrate the apparent end of Disney animation.
It's crazy to think there was a time when shutting down the animation department was actually being considered. I mean, Disney had theme parks that were based primarily around their animated movies. What would they have done if they had stopped making animated films? Would they have based the rides on the live-action Disney movies? Have a Tim Allen-themed roller coaster? Of course, we all know the animation department never did shut down, like many feared, and Disney managed to flip their flop era into a full-blown renaissance at the tail end of the 80s. I'm sure if Walt had been alive to see it, he would have been very proud.
I'm so proud, I think I'll bust.
But in the past couple of years, Disney seems to have found itself in a flop era once again, with a string of box office bombs, an ousted CEO, and a general sense that the company has lost sight of the art in pursuit of profits. History really does repeat itself, doesn't it? As far as what's causing Disney's current slump, there's different theories. Some say it's Disney Plus siphoning audiences away from movie theaters. In the case of Marvel, some say it's superhero fatigue. These superheroes are just so darn tired. I mean, in the last Ant-Man movie, there's 10 straight minutes of him just napping. And of course, some people like to proclaim that it's a consequence of Disney choosing to go woke in their movies. I haven't seen the live-action Little Mermaid remake, but holy crap, based on the absolute uproar that it's caused with some people, it must be absolutely radical with its messaging. Disney has gone overboard with their woke agenda in the new Little Mermaid movie. They removed the song Part of Your World and replaced it with a new song called It's Racist Not to Be Gay. But in my humble, correct opinion, I think it's simply that Disney's movies have come down with a classic case of the not-so-goods. Disney thought they could keep winning by playing it safe, but it turns out that playing it safe can be pretty risky. I think the solution here is simple. Make better movies. I mean, Pirates of the Caribbean became one of Disney's biggest franchises, and that was based on a theme park ride, which at the time it was first coming out, sounded like the dumbest idea ever. But everyone ate it up, including me. People absolutely fruitin' loved that first movie, me mateys. And you know why? Because that first movie slaps. It slaps from the very beginning, and it never stops slapping. That movie slaps more than Will Smith at a Chris Rock convention. As much as Disney's detractors are celebrating its current hardships as the beginning of its demise, the truth is that Disney and its long and storied history has been through worse before, and they'll probably be fine. It's just a fact of life that in the pursuit of making great content, you're occasionally gonna make some duds and generate a bit of hate along the way. After all, you can't spell great without hate. But if you are a hater who just wants to see Disney go down in flames, I've got some good news for you. Disney reacquired the rights to the Chronicles of Prydain with rumored plans to do a live-action remake. Yes, a remake of a movie that flopped so hard it almost killed their studio. It might just be the thing that does Disney in once and for all. History really does repeat itself, doesn't it? Guys, if you like this video, be sure to hit the subscribe button to join my clubhouse. And this ain't no Mickey Mouse clubhouse. I'm building a clubhouse of all the coolest people on YouTube. So if you think you're cool, you better subscribe and get your cool ass in here while there's still room. This clubhouse is getting pretty big, which I have to admit, I'm very, very proud of.
I'm so proud, I think I'll bust.
You know what, Walt? Me too. Also, come check out my live stand-up show. I don't have any specific dates or venues, just go to the nearest live comedy club and I'll be there. So, I keep hearing people talk about how Disney movies these days are woke. Yeah, I heard Disney's working on a woke remake of Sleeping Beauty. It's just gonna be called Beauty. Because it's woke, so she's not sleeping anymore, because she woke up. Sounds like Jiminy Cricket is in the audience tonight. Am I right? Ooh, man, I'm bombing up here harder than the Marvels at the box office. Okay, I'm just gonna be straight with you guys. I have 8 more minutes of material that's all about Disney, so should I just stop now, or how about by a round of applause? Who wants me to stop now? Oh, that's everyone. Everyone's clapping. Even my parents are clapping. That hurts. That's deep.